Thank you very much, Alexandra. I suppose you hear me? Yeah, okay. First of all, I'm also super grateful for this project that you wanted to have our exhibition here in Tallinn. It's a big project for us in a way. It's not very typical that we go somewhere with our this large exhibition, like presenting the whole collection in a way. Well, not all the collection. Serlachius collection is about 10,000 pieces, works of art, and here we have something like a little bit less than 8 here, if I remember right. But still, we don't do it very often. It's like during the time that I have been in Mänttäs, which is 25 years now, it happened only twice. We were in Stockholm once, and then we were in Hamm in Germany, and now we are coming here to Tallinn, and it's of course super important for us, and we've been kind of laughing also because most of our audiences actually, they are not local audiences from Mänttäs, because Mänttäs is a very, very small place, but most of them come from Helsinki, and we at some point actually understood that it's now even more easy for them to come here to Tallinn than to Mänttäs, because it takes you really like 3 hours to drive to Mänttäs from Helsinki, and it's the citizens of inhabitants of Helsinki, they are not so super happy to go to distant places in north. So this is actually a good possibility also for Finns to come and see our collection here in Mänttäs, in Tallinn, and I'm happy. Also, we had a discussion this morning with Alexandra, and I heard that very many Finns have found this exhibition, so this is a great thing, of course, for us. But so, now we are going to speak about art patronage. It's mostly about art and money. I will be speaking later about Serlachius and Mänttäs. So now the first talk that I'm going to have for you will be mostly about kind of a general history of art patronage and history of art and money, how it has been happening in general. And art patronage, some starting points. What is it all about? And this is a list of things that I could think about myself, what it might be. I think art patronage is very much about wealth, it's about money, it's about social status and prestige, power and politics, values, identity, defining taste, defining the canon, and also about art. Sorry to leave the most important word maybe as a last one, but this is how it goes when we see art from this perspective. Wealth and money. You actually see there an image of Jan van Eyck's artwork in which there are some art patrons coming to salute, to greet the Virgin and the child, Mary and Jesus. And we might see a little bit what we see in this image. We definitely see wealth. These seem to be rich guys coming with many gifts to meet Mary and Jesus, and they clearly have social status and prestige because of their money, because of their position in the society, and this is what usually happens in art patronage things. And it's very much also about power and politics, because these people who are rich in the contemporary societies or societies in the history, of course they were the guys who could decide what happens in politics and how the states are doing their business and what happens. But then I wanted to kind of widen it also to other things. It's also about values, how the societies should be taken care of, what happens, what is good, what is bad in a community, in a society. And very much about identity, who you think you are when you are kind of a rich person. You have a lot of money, you have a lot of influence, you have a lot of political power. And then when you are doing things with art, what kind of image you are trying to create of yourself. And then it's also very much about defining taste. So now we come closer to art and the fields normally associated to art. If you're influential, rich, politically big figure, you can also kind of decide what is good taste, and you can decide what are the artworks that will end up in the canon of good art in history. And this is what the art patrons have been doing all the time. But still, we need to remember that it's very much also about art, and that this is also a very beneficial system for artists also. And if we move further on, try to analyze the playground a little bit. Who are the guys who are playing the game in art patronage? That's mostly like rulers, it's kings, it's emperors, it's popes, people who have the political power. But it's also aristocrats. This is the so-called like old money in a way, people who are born into their position, very often sharing certain ideals, certain values in which art plays a central role also. But then there are also guys from what we call new money. For example, when I will be telling you about corporate patrons, this is there it comes to like since the industrialization, a lot of new people came to the field, and this is actually important thing because it might be that they had a little bit different values from those guys who were like aristocrats and kings. But then players also included artists, of course, for whom this was or is still like a meaningful way to make their living. And we also need to remember that this same playground is shared by many other people, not only artists, but also like sportsmen and celebrities and scholars have been earning their living through same kind of patronage, and many art patrons have been giving money not only for visual artists or other artists like musicians and so on, but also for philosophers and scientists and other players in the field. There is something I would like you to pay attention right away. It's in a way what is important in this story is that it's about, on the other hand, it's about individuals, and then it's about collective. Many individuals. When we are speaking like art patrons, the most typical case is a ruler, aristocrat, or an industrialist, like a rich, politically powerful person, individual who is supporting artists. But then it's also about collectives. There are families, religious institutions like Christian churches. There are, like in medieval times, there were guilds, like groups of merchants sharing similar interest and having their own clubs in a way. And later also states and corporations which come to play in this field. And of course we are also speaking about art market, because this is, in a way, this is all about money, and this is how pieces of art, like artworks, how they move from one person's collection or that it's owned by someone to another person's. And usually if we think, we all know how art market is operating nowadays. It's very much about galleries and exhibitions. You go to galleries, you might buy a piece of art, but it's also, especially with older art, it's very much about auctions. Someone wants to sell it, and then they organize an auction, and you just try to see if you have enough money to get it. But then, of course, you can also go directly to the artists and buy it directly. Then you don't need to pay anything for the gallery or any other broker. For example, in auctions, there are always big money goes also to those who are operating the auctions. And there is also a difference, a big difference between the first market and the secondary market in contemporary art. Usually if you buy art from the artist nowadays, for example in Finland, and you go directly to the artist, you actually pay them more than if you go and buy it from some art shop or place like that, because but for example, museums kind of want to buy directly from the artist, because in that way they are kind of making the living of artists easier, and it's kind of a modern art patronage also. But the contemporary idea of art market, we need to remember that this is quite, all this that I was telling you about, it's quite late development. Earlier it was, and now I'm speaking about like many centuries before our century, the general system was that most of the artworks were ordered as commissions, and the artists actually were not considered to be such like heroic artists as in our times, but they were kind of craftsmen. They were skilled in drawing or painting or doing something else, and they were not like celebrities in a way, still in medieval times. And then another thing was that there was always a personal relationship between these two parties, the one who was selling art and the one who was buying art. So it was very personal, and this in a way leads us to what I want to speak about art patrons. And we also need to remember that the whole idea of autonomy of art is also kind of a late development, or let's say it started happening during the Renaissance times. In the medieval times, the authorship was not so clearly defined. Actually, they thought that the art patron who was financing art was in a way as important person as the artist himself or herself when it came to defining who created this or that piece of art in a way. So it was, the authorship was not so clear. During the Renaissance, we all know the story, individualism became more and more important things, and then it continued during the times of Romanticism. And I also wrote Nietzsche here, like superheroes, people, individuals became more and more important. And thus, step by step was born something that how the art world is constituted now, that there is even kind of a star cult, that the artist is in the spotlight, and we all are thinking that the artist is the great hero, cultural hero, seeing things a little bit differently or better than the other people, and this is why we want to buy their art pieces. Still about the benefits of art patronage, this has been for centuries, this has been a very beneficial culture for the artists. Why? Well, I tried to put some words there. What are the important things? Of course, the artists are making their living with art patronage. They got very many commissions. So someone came to them, asked them that, can you paint me this and this and this kind of piece, and I will pay you this and that. And that was like the general system how art pieces were born. They, for example, also they got expensive materials from the art patrons. In many cases, it was so that, for example, in Renaissance time, the actual like materials for the painters, the paint itself was very expensive thing. It was considered to be a luxury project. So they really had to like have someone to pay for that. And they got studios and working places. They got their jobs in many cases, but they also kind of shared the prestige of the art patrons and the kings and queens and princes and popes in a way by being close to them, and in a way also got their share of the power in the society. They were like important guys. What is the flip side? Of course, if you do something for money, it's always about, there is always a possibility for corruption, and you are dependent in a way. We have in Finnish we have a saying, kenen lauluja laulut sen leipää syöt, which is like whose songs you are singing, you are eating his bread in a way, saying it very clearly what is this relationship about. And then very short introduction of the history of art patronage. My main source here has been our a curator who used to work with us, Petra Lehtoruusu. She now works in Atheneum, but she wrote a beautiful article about the history of patronage in our book recently, and she wanted to start it with Gaius Cilnius Mecenas, who actually gave his name for many art, for the whole institution of art patronage. For example, in Finnish we call art patron mesenaatti. I don't know if this is also the case in Estonian language. But he was from a wealthy equestrian lineage, partly Etruscan, and he was backing Octavian, who later became the Emperor August after the power struggle after Caesar's murder. And he was this kind of a very cultured person who was really using art as a kind of a political weapon. He had his villa on Esquilin Hill, which was kind of a cultural hub. And he handled many political ambitions through poetry. He was giving money for Virgil and Horatius, who were the poets who were celebrating the reign of Augustus. And he also had a real political role. He was an influencer in his society. Then in medieval time, church became important. Of course, they had to kind of, when Christianity became popular, the idea was actually to be poor. But then later, because they kind of, the society had to continue according to the rules, how things happen between people. So the rich people started also embracing positions inside the church administration, and they understood that when they have a religious power, when they are kind of friends of the most powerful guy in the universe, which happens to be God, from the point of view of Christianity, they understood that they get like a power in their society by being friends of Christ. And church, of course, offered many possibilities in many levels. Popes, monasteries, parishes, bishops, priests, all were potential art patrons. And why church needed artists? Because they wanted to visualize theology. They wanted to visualize the stories of and narratives of the Bible for the common people who in most cases couldn't even read. And so they built cathedrals, they built religious centers, especially in Rome, but also in all countries. And many important artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, they created their career as paid by the church. I need to go a little bit faster now. Then the Medici, the family of bankers from Florence and Tuscany, they were active from 14th century to 18th century. The family produced many princes, popes, and queens also. It started with Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici, who was a moneylender to the Holy See, and built many local churches. For example, Brunelleschi was one of his architects. Then came Cosimo de' Medici, who was the first Medici ruler in Florence, built churches, monasteries, and worked with Michelangelo, Fra Angelico, Donatello. And then his grandson Lorenzo de' Medici, who was living during the zenith of high Italian Renaissance and was working with Botticelli, Michelangelo, many artists. Then later they understood that popes had even more power than the rulers of Florence, so they went to Rome. For example, Leo X and Clement the Sixth were some popes from Medici family, and then female Medici family members went to France, married French kings, and if the kings happened to die, they actually ruled the country, so they were very important persons. Then came the French Revolution. Modern nation states were born, and the state or royal art academies were the places where art bubble happened very much in that time. They were responsible for training artists and organizing exhibitions and things like that. And the most known case, of course, is the Academy in France, and they very much believed in classical tradition. French Revolution created many new trends in a way. It was not anymore like that the king would be in focus, but the nation was in focus. And the artists needed to celebrate the nation more than kings. But then actually kings came back. And here we see Napoleon, for example, who was very good at using arts in his imperial propaganda. Later, also art started, people started using art when they wanted to strengthen the modern welfare states. For example, in United States, New Deal in 1930s had an arts program also, and they understood that national culture can be created through art in focus also in democratic countries. And then we come to corporate patrons, Industrial Revolution. That was like the time of the new money, and you will hear about that from Tommy very much about how it happened in Mänttäs, so I'm not going there. But the industrialist bankers, traders brought their bourgeois values into the field of art and started working also with artists. There are some examples, for example, Rothschild family, international banking family, who were active in Britain, in France, in Italy, in Austria, for example. So it was a very super international, a global phenomenon in a way. They supported many artists and actually started supporting also some of the most important European art museums, bringing their collections there. And American Rockefeller family, who got their money from oil, who were also very much active in politics. They were also having their art program, and social responsibility was in their case also very much in focus. And they also were very active in creating institutionalized forms of art patronage. So I'm actually ending this first part of my talk here by saying that the role of states and municipalities, in a way, it still dominates very much in this field. Artists are very much in contemporary democratic states. They are getting very big part of their money from state and municipality. But then foundations, such as, for example, our foundation, Serlachius Foundation, which are kind of institutionalized players following in the footsteps of individual art collectors. They are now more and more important. But there is still room for individual, like art patrons. This guy here is Kyösti Kakkonen, for example, who is a big art mecenaatti or art patron in Finland, has been supporting directly also both individual artists, but also museums, like he's collaborating very much with Emma Museum in Espoo. And the museums, actually, they are playing this card very carefully now, because very often that museums have big projects, they try to have this kind of institutionalized or individual art patron to help them to cover the costs. For example, when we had our, of Finland, now I'm speaking about we as Finns, we had our big hero Helen Schärfbeck in Metropolitan Museum, a big exhibition which was super big thing for Finland and Finns. We were so proud of that, and it, for example, happened, it didn't happen so that Metropolitan would have put their money into this exhibition, but they searched for individual art sponsor who paid the thing, and thus we saw this exhibition. And then very big question is that since the art patrons nowadays want to work with institutions like museums, like corporations, like things like this, what is the role of art patronage for individual artists? This is something that we need to think about very carefully. This was my first part. I'm sorry, it might be I was a little bit too long, but Tommy will continue.